Israel has carried out strikes on Iran's nuclear program.
Following the State of Israel's preemptive strike against Iran, a missile and drone attack against the State of Israel and its civilian population is expected.
Attacks by Israel on Iran are expanding, and so is the crossfire.
Israel has carried out a major and highly anticipated series of airstrikes against Iran.
On June 24, 2025, Israeli Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir gave this statement. Ground commando forces were operating deep inside Iran and creating freedom of operation for us. The statement wasn't news, but confirmation of what many people watching the operation already knew from leaked footage and eyewitness reports. The Mossad agents had infiltrated Iran before Operation Rising Lion on June 13th. We achieved full control over Iranian airspace and every location we chose to operate in, Zamir said. This was made possible in part due to the integration and deception carried out by air and ground commando forces. So, for the first time, Israel admitted to operating on the ground inside Iranian territory. Public evidence of this activity has already started surfacing as early as June 13th, when news reports in Western media outlined an operation where Mossad and elite IDF forces spent months quietly building a lethal presence inside Iran. They smuggled quadricopter drones, precision-guided munitions, comms gear, and operatives into the country, hidden in civilian vehicles, suitcases, shipping containers, even repackaged as electronics or household goods. By early June, the teams and equipment were in place outside of Tehran, as Faizabad and other high-value sites. News outlets even reported on a hidden drone hub operating out of a suburban building, rigged with launch capabilities and secure power sources. So, on June 13th, around 3:30 a.m., as dozens of Israeli jets took off for the airstrike, Mossad commandos were already on the ground, launching drones and vehicle-mounted Spike-in LOS missiles at anti-aircraft and radar targets. The elite teams that had infiltrated deep into Iran were picking apart their air defenses from the inside out. At that moment, the operation shifted from covert planning to overt action, with ground teams integrating seamlessly into the air campaign that would soon be roaring overhead. Even as the drones attacked, Mossad agents were streaming live targeting data through encrypted channels to Israeli command centers. They jammed radar frequencies and cut communication lines, effectively leaving Iranian forces blind and deaf. According to an intelligence official, this integration of human operatives and intelligence systems was a fused intelligence and special operations campaign. Meanwhile, psychological operations unfolded in parallel. Israeli operatives got into Iranian telephone systems, and covert calls in Persian went out to high-ranking IRGC officials and generals, giving them 12 hours to evacuate or die. Leaked audio shared by the Washington Post confirmed these messages, showing the precision of the Israeli tactics. Their goal wasn't humanitarian either. It was to sow confusion, destroy equipment, and let the Iranian brass know that the Israelis knew where they worked, where they lived, and that they could get them at any time. But before we go any further, please take a second to hit the like and subscribe buttons. Stories like these don't make it into the mainstream anymore, and every click helps this content cut through the noise, so more people understand just how quickly warfare is changing. With Iranian air defenses and communications destroyed, and the military confused, the roughly 200 aircraft launched from Israel started to arrive and strike over 100 targets. These included nuclear facilities at Natanz and Fordow, missile depots near Kermanshah, and important IRGC command posts in Tehran. The drones that struck first had worked, giving the IAF total air supremacy for their attack runs. Guided by the Mossad ground units and the ELW-2085 Nachshon item AWACS planes flying above, by dawn, the F-35 Adir, F-16 Sufa, and F-15 Ra'am had finished the job, raining down precision munitions on nuclear and military targets all across Iran. They were supported by mid-air refueling from covert Boeing 707 Ra'am aircraft and the newly acquired KC-46 Pegasus. And suddenly, Iran, after decades of threats and posturing, was reduced to watching the Israeli strike force recede into the distance, backlit by the rising sun. Once the strikes began, the commandos faded into the landscape. It isn't confirmed, but the operation probably involved units like Sayeret Matkal and She'etet 13. These teams are known for deep penetration sabotage, speed, and exfiltration, so it totally makes sense that they were involved. The covert drone base shut down, equipment was stashed or destroyed, and vehicles melted back into civilian traffic, at least for the time being. By sunrise, the results were overwhelming. Iranian radar and nuclear infrastructure suffered catastrophic damage, as precision munitions and drones dismantled the regime's strategic depth in a matter of hours. The Fordow enrichment facility, long considered impenetrable inside its mountain shield, was struck at key tunnel entrances. Satellite imagery revealed collapsed access points and signs of secondary explosions deep within. At Natanz, Iran's primary uranium enrichment hub, cascading failures hit the centrifuge halls, destroying hundreds of centrifuge units, while external power lines and backup generators were disabled, crippling the site's ability to recover. The Isfahan complex, which included fuel production and research infrastructure, was also hit, leaving charred buildings and containment domes broken apart. In the west, a series of coordinated strikes had neutralized missile depots in Kermanshah and Tabriz, including hardened silos and underground transport tunnels. Air defense radars and fire control systems across Tehran's perimeter were disabled by drones before the attacks started, leaving vast portions of Iranian airspace unprotected during the attack. Equally devastating was the human toll. The Israeli strikes targeted Iran's strategic brain trust. Major General Mohammad Bagheri, Iran's chief of staff and a central figure in war planning, was confirmed killed in the opening salvo. General Hussein Salami, commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, was also killed during an attempted relocation. Amir Ali Hajizadeh, the head of Iran's aerospace force and architect of its missile doctrine, was among the casualties as well. The head of Khatam al-Anbiya, Iran's strategic military coordination center, was killed in a strike on the Tehran defense headquarters. In one striking case, Major General Gholam Ali Rashid, commander of the Khatam al-Anbiya central headquarters, was killed in the opening hours of Operation Rising Lion on June 13th, when Israeli jets struck his command center in Tehran. Just 4 days later, his successor, Major General Ali Shadmani, who'd been tapped to replace Rashid as Iran's wartime military commander, was also taken out by a precision airstrike on June 17th. I bet there were a lot of Iranian officers praying to Allah not to be promoted. The nuclear program's leadership was also decapitated when Gholam Reza Marabi, chief of operations at Fordow, was killed in the first wave. And within days, his successor and several senior scientists were dead as well, caught in targeted drone strikes and follow-up bombings. Iran's military response to Operation Rising Lion came in the form of overwhelming volume, but not precision. In the days following the Israeli strikes, Iran launched hundreds of ballistic missiles and explosive drones towards Israeli cities and military installations. But unlike the surgical nature of the Israeli operation, which targeted radar stations, nuclear sites, and high-ranking military officials, Iran's retaliation was indiscriminate. Wild barrages triggered air raid sirens across Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Be'er Sheva, as drones and missiles were swatted out of the sky by Iron Dome and David's Sling systems. Israeli air defense can boast an interception rate of over 90%, but some missiles still got through. The most damaging hit landed at Soroka Medical Center in Be'er Sheva, injuring dozens. In Tel Aviv, a missile impacted near the Kiryat, Israel's military headquarters. Although it didn't penetrate, it shook the ground of the national command. Iranian drones and missiles also struck at the Weizmann Institute of Science in Rehovot and the Gavyam Tech Park in Be'er Sheva. In the north, a drone hit a 2-story civilian building, one of the rare cases where the IDF confirmed a direct drone strike. In Ramat Gan, Bolan, and Tamra, residential neighborhoods sustained damage, with shattered windows and minor injuries. Perhaps most alarming was the strike near Haifa, where part of the Bazan oil refinery and a local power station were damaged, leading to fires and blackouts. Although most threats were intercepted, these few successful hits illustrate how a saturation strategy can challenge even the second most advanced missile shield in the world, and how Iran's goal was as much psychological as tactical. In the days and weeks after the Israeli strikes, the Iranian regime launched an intense internal crackdown. The scope of the operation had shocked the country, both for its massive scale, but also for the chilling realization that foreign agents had operated undetected on Iranian soil for several months. The supreme leader and his inner circle responded with fury, determined to root out anyone who might have collaborated with the Israeli invaders, either knowingly or even unknowingly. Security services, led by the Ministry of Intelligence and the IRGCs, began rounding up suspects across the country. Over 700 people were arrested in the first sweep, including border agents, customs officers, defense ministry technicians, civilian contractors, and low-level Revolutionary Guard personnel. Tehran and Qom saw especially heavy raids, with Basij paramilitaries detaining dozens in the early morning hours. In the capital, entire apartment blocks were sealed off for questioning. Within a week, the state announced that it had uncovered multiple collaborators with Zionist intelligence and began fast-tracking trials in closed revolutionary courts. At least 3 executions were confirmed. Televised confessions aired on Islamic Republic of Iran broadcasting under obvious duress. State media warned that treachery in times of war is met with death. Meanwhile, the regime reshuffled dozens of key defense and intelligence officials. The heads of several military research institutes were quietly retired or reassigned, and an internal security purge swept through Iran's western provinces, where Mossad's operations were believed to have had their deepest footprint. Iran's response was harsh, but calculated. More than retribution, the purge was deterrence. The message was clear. That betrayal would be met with death, and the state was watching. Whether this restored faith in the regime's control or deepened public fears remains an open question. But in the wake of the most devastating breach of sovereignty since the Iran-Iraq War, Tehran needs to show it is still in charge. Israel's military doctrine has always been shaped by geography, the proximity to threats, and the unrelenting pressure of regional hostility. But in the span of a few decades, the way it uses force has undergone a stunning transformation. From the brute force air raid of Operation Opera in 1981, to the elegant digital sabotage of Stuxnet in 2010, and finally to the surgical hybrid warfare of Operation Rising Lion in 2025, Israel has rewritten the playbook for modern war. It began with jets over Baghdad. On June 7, 1981, Israeli F-16s, escorted by F-15s, roared across enemy airspace and demolished Iraq's Osirak nuclear reactor. It was a conventional strike, loud, risky as hell, and unsubtle. But it sent a clear message that Israel would never allow a local adversary to have nuclear weapons. The international community condemned the attack at the time, but history would eventually vindicate it. Osirak was weeks from being fired up, and while it was a bold mission, it also exposed the limits of traditional force. Long-range bombings didn't leave any room for interpretation or deniability. Stuxnet, on the other hand, was silent. No explosions, no planes, or soldiers, just coding. Developed jointly with the United States, Stuxnet was deployed sometime around 2007 and discovered in 2010. It snuck through Iranian computer systems, delivered by a USB memory stick, specifically targeting Siemens industrial controllers inside the Natanz enrichment facility. Centrifuges spun out of control and shattered themselves without a shot fired. Iran's nuclear progress was set back years, and most of the world didn't even realize what had happened until long after. Opera was a sledgehammer. Stuxnet was a scalpel. It marked the dawn of digital warfare and proved that sabotage could now travel invisibly. But both of these approaches, raw firepower and digital sabotage, were separate tools. But Rising Lion brought them together. In June of 2025, Israel launched the most ambitious military operation in world history. Not with soldiers or bombs alone, and not with code, but with a synchronized campaign that blended espionage, cyber operations, airborne precision, psychological warfare, and units on the ground. It wasn't just an airstrike. It was a symphony of destruction. And its success depends on timing, integration, and months of preparation. Commandos on the ground had spent weeks embedded inside of Iran, establishing drone hubs, rigging civilian vehicles, and identifying key targets. Israeli intelligence agencies, including Mossad, laid the groundwork by hacking communication systems, feeding disinformation, and warning Iranian officers to flee if they wanted to live. Then came the drones, hundreds of them, launched from inside the country, overwhelming radar sites and jamming frequencies. By the time the jets arrived, air defense was already so confused that they couldn't react. Rising Lion destroyed more than nuclear facilities and military brass, it destroyed confidence. After years of threats and proxy strikes from Iran and its allies, the Israelis said, "This is enough." It demonstrates that Israel can reach deep into enemy territory, strike with total precision, and hit only military targets. They have no quarrel with Iranian civilians, just the government, and the military is all that they attacked, while Iranian cruise missiles fly indiscriminately into hospitals and schools. This is a new type of war, exemplified by Rising Lion and the Cold Start Doctrine in India. That's why the operation mattered even more than the physical damage it inflicted. It signaled a new age where wars are no longer fought on visible front lines. What unites all 3 Israeli operations, Opera, Stuxnet, Rising Lion, is a doctrine of preemption. Israel doesn't want to wait for the threats to materialize. It strikes first, decisively, and often in defiance of global norms. But the means have changed. In Opera, pilots took all the risk. In Stuxnet, programmers did. In Rising Lion, it was a carefully coordinated blend. Techs, spies, pilots, and soldiers all dancing to the same tune. This transformation mirrors a broader evolution in modern warfare. Targets are no longer just tanks and airbases. They're servers, scientists, command structures, and psychological pressure points delivered by cell phone. Israel has adapted to this faster than anyone. The IDF doesn't just train its pilots, it trains its hackers. Mossad collects secrets as well as engineers as network penetrators. Elite units don't just fight, they enable strategic deception at the level of statecraft. Some will say this model can't be replicated. Israel, after all, has specific motivations, unique resources, and a culture of intelligence dominance. But the blueprint is now out in the world. Nations like India, South Korea, and the US are watching closely. So are Iran, Russia, and China. Everyone is learning that war in the 21st century is a fluid, multi-domain arena. And Rising Lion, along with the spiderweb in Ukraine, is the clearest case study yet. The hybrid nature of this operation, drones launched from rented apartments, missiles hidden in secondhand trucks, ground teams slipping away like ghosts, makes traditional countermeasures feel outdated. What good is a tank when your radar has already been blinded? What good is a general when he's getting threats by phone? His command network's been hacked and his safe house is on fire. That's the world now. Asymmetric warfare isn't just for insurgents anymore. Rising Lion was an asymmetric war executed by a state actor. And it worked. It was the future, probably the best coordinated assault in history. In some ways, Israel's doctrine has come full circle. From 1981's high-risk bombing to 2025's ghost strike, it's never been about sheer size. It's been about edge. They've proven that so many times that it's ridiculous. Israel is a state built for war, and with Rising Lion, they did that better than ever. The lesson here is simple, but chilling. If your enemies can reach into your cities undetected, they don't need a standing army. Just willpower, technology, and a little bit of patience. And now, the rest of the world has to decide how to respond. What would happen if a non-state actor decided to act inside Europe or the US? My opinion is that the most valuable assets need to be dispersed so that they can't be targeted in a single strike. If we need missile shields everywhere, then what kind of European or American lives are we living? We need to treat attacks against the West as terrorism and not let them hit our most valuable assets en masse. We are lucky to live in the West, but let's spread our assets out and not be in a position to take massive hits like Spiderweb or Rising Lion. We have a sword here, but it might be turned on us soon. The enemy is taking notes.